At 63 years old, I felt something I thought was impossible, something that touched every part of me, that made me question everything I believed about myself, about my marriage, about the life I had built. And when I say everything touched me, I'm talking about emotions I didn't know still lived inside this tired body, feelings that connected with every broken piece of my heart. My name is Eleanor, and what I'm about to tell you changed my family, my reputation, and almost broke me. It all started on a Tuesday morning in Savannah, a morning like any other after 38 years of marriage. My husband Thomas was reading the newspaper at breakfast, the same habit we'd kept since 1987. Our three children had their own lives now. James in Boston with his family, Emily in Atlanta climbing the corporate ladder, and David, our youngest, still trying to find himself in Portland. The house felt empty, huge, like a museum of old memories that no longer felt alive. Thomas and I had become roommates who shared a bed, but nothing more. We hadn't really connected in over 5 years, and honestly, I had accepted that. Or so I thought. That morning, Thomas said he was going to spend 3 weeks in Denver for a work conference. 3 weeks. I felt nothing. Not relief, not sadness, just nothing. And that emptiness scared me more than any feeling. When he left that Thursday, taking his suitcase and giving me a quick kiss on the forehead, I stood at the door watching his car disappear down the tree-lined street of our neighborhood in Savannah, and I felt like I was fading away too. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own life, please hit that subscribe button. This story is for you, and you need to hear what happened next. The loneliness of that first weekend was overwhelming. I tried to fill my days with the usual things, my book club, volunteering at the community center, gardening, but everything felt automatic, without life. On Sunday evening, while watering the roses in my backyard, my neighbor Laura called me over the fence. She looked worried. That look people give when they see something you're trying to hide. "Eleanor, honey, are you okay? You look lost." I wanted to say I was fine, but instead tears I didn't know were there started falling. Laura climbed over that fence, and for the first time in years, someone held me while I cried. Really held me. She invited me to her house for tea, and that's where she told me about the art class she went to every Tuesday night in downtown Savannah. "It changed my life," she said, her eyes bright. "You should come. No husbands, no duties, just women creating and being themselves." I laughed at the word free. At 63, what did freedom even mean anymore? But something in her words planted a seed. The following Tuesday, I found myself walking into a converted warehouse that had become an art studio. The smell of paint and cleaner, the sound of music I didn't know, the buzz of talk and laughter, it all felt new and exciting. There were about 15 women there, all different ages, and at the front of the room, setting up canvases and organizing brushes, was a man who made my heart skip. His name was Daniel. He was 47, and he looked at the world like it was a beautiful thing waiting to be seen. When his eyes met mine during introductions, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I felt noticed, not as someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's volunteer, but as Eleanor, just Eleanor. And that feeling, that being seen, it reached every part of me that had been asleep. It connected with the woman I used to be before I became everyone else's everything. The class that night was about painting feelings. Daniel walked around the room looking at each person's canvas, giving gentle advice. When he reached me, staring at my blank canvas, he knelt beside my chair. "What are you afraid to feel?" he asked softly. The question opened something in me. My hand started moving, almost on its own, making dark swirls that turned into stormy seas. He didn't say anything else, just stayed there beside me, his presence warm and steady, while I painted years of hidden feelings. At the end of class, he touched my shoulder lightly. "This is strong, Eleanor. You have something true here. Will you come back?" I nodded, unable to speak, and drove home with my heart beating like I was young again. If you're feeling this with me, if you understand this awakening, subscribe to this channel because what comes next will surprise you. I started going to the class every Tuesday and sometimes Thursday too. When Daniel offered advanced sessions, Thomas called from Denver occasionally, our talks short and simple. "How are you?" "Fine. House okay?" "Yes." "Okay. I have a dinner meeting." Click. Meanwhile, I was learning to see colors again, to feel textures, to express years of quiet pain through paint and charcoal. Daniel and I began staying after class, talking about art, about life, about dreams we'd let go. He told me about his divorce 3 years ago, how his ex-wife said he loved art more than he loved her. And maybe she was right. He told me about growing up in New Orleans, about his daughter who was studying in Paris, about how he saw beauty in broken things, and I told him things I'd never told anyone, about feeling like a ghost in my own life, about the miscarriage I'd had between Emily and David that Thomas never wanted to talk about the novel I started writing at 25 and gave up because motherhood and marriage took everything, about feeling like I was fading slowly, quietly, and no one noticed because I was fading without noise. One Thursday night, 2 months into my artistic awakening, everyone else had left, and Daniel and I were cleaning brushes in comfortable silence. Rain was pouring outside, hitting the warehouse's metal roof hard. "I don't want to go home," I said suddenly, surprising myself. He looked at me with those kind eyes. "Then don't," he said simply. We sat on the paint-stained floor, backs against the wall, and talked until 3 in the morning. He told me I was brave. Me. Brave. Thomas had never once called me that, and when Daniel reached over and held my hand, that simple touch sent warmth through my whole body. Every part of me that had been quiet woke up. Every hidden wish came up. Every part of me that had been closed opened again. I pulled my hand away, scared. "I'm married," I whispered. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for anything, Eleanor. I'm just here." But we both knew that wasn't completely true. The air between us was full of something strong and special. I drove home that night shaking, my mind racing. What was I doing? I was a 63-year-old married woman with grandchildren, for goodness sake. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. A woman with warm cheeks, bright eyes, someone alive. The guilt came right after. Thomas might not be close anymore, but he was my husband. We had a history, a family, a life built together. But what kind of life was it really? A life of routine and silence and slowly fading. I didn't sleep that night, and I've barely slept well since. If you're struggling with this moral difficulty, if you're torn between duty and desire, hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because this only gets more complicated. Thomas came home from Denver 2 days later, and I could barely look at him. Every time he spoke to me in that distant way, every time he walked past me without really seeing me, I thought about Daniel, about how Daniel listened when I spoke, how he smiled at my jokes, how he looked at my paintings like they mattered, like I mattered. The difference was too much. I kept going to the art classes, telling Thomas I had found a hobby, which wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. He seemed happy, actually, that I had something to do. "That's great, Ellie," he said, not looking up from his laptop. He was the only one who called me Ellie, and I used to love it, but now it felt like he was talking to someone who wasn't there anymore. Daniel and I didn't hold hands again for several weeks, but the connection grew with every class. We'd share looks that lasted too long. Our hands would brush when passing supplies. Once he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear while looking at my work, and I caught my breath. The other women in class noticed. Laura pulled me aside one evening. "Be careful, honey," she warned. "I see how you two look at each other. I'm not judging. God knows I'm not. But be careful. People get hurt." I knew she was right, but I couldn't stop. For the first time in decades, I felt something other than numb. Then came the night of the gallery opening. Daniel had organized a small show of student work at a local coffee shop, and 3 of my paintings were included. Thomas said he'd come, but called at the last minute with an excuse about a conference call with Singapore. Of course, I went alone, wearing a dress I'd bought that afternoon, something that made me feel beautiful instead of invisible. The opening was simple, but nice, with tea and snacks, and people actually talking about the art. When I stood in front of my painting, the stormy one from that first class, Daniel came up beside me. "This is where it all started," he said quietly. "You opening up." I turned to look at him, and the care in his eyes was clear. "Daniel," I started, but he shook his head. "Come with me," he said, and led me to a small storage room behind the coffee shop. We stood there in the dim light among boxes of supplies inches apart, breathing deeply. "Tell me to stop," he said. "Tell me this is wrong, and I'll step back and we'll pretend this never happened." But I couldn't say those words because I didn't want him to stop. I wanted to feel everything I'd missed, everything I'd hidden, everything I'd told myself I no longer needed. He leaned in then, and we shared a gentle moment of closeness, full of all the longing we'd held back. His words were soft in my ear, mine against his shoulder, and I felt like I was being held and renewed at the same time. Everything touched me in that moment. Desire, guilt, fear, joy, shame, peace, all of it connected with every mixed part of my heart. When we finally stepped back, both breathing hard, I was crying. I can't do this, I said, even as every part of me said the opposite. I know, he said, resting his forehead against mine, but you already are. And he was right. Whether we went further or not, I had already crossed a line. I had already been unfaithful in my heart, and that truth hurt deeply. I left the gallery without saying goodbye to anyone, drove home in a daze, and sat in my bathroom overwhelmed by emotions. Are you still with me? Because this is where everything truly changes. Subscribe if you need to know what happens, because I promise you're not ready. I stopped going to the art classes. I couldn't face Daniel, couldn't face myself, couldn't face what I'd done and what I wanted to do. I threw myself into being the perfect wife again, cooking Thomas's favorite meals, organizing his closet, doing all the things that used to define me. But Thomas noticed something was different. At dinner one night, he actually looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. You seem different, he said. Are you okay? Okay? That's what he thought. Not happy, not troubled, not going through something, but okay. I almost laughed. No, Thomas, I'm not okay. I'm just trying to figure out who I am. He looked confused. You're my wife? You're the kid's mother? What else is there to figure out? And that sentence, that casual dismissal of my whole inner world, broke something that couldn't be fixed. Daniel started calling, texting. I ignored everything for 2 weeks, but then he showed up at my house one afternoon when Thomas was at work. I saw his car from the window, and my heart nearly stopped. I should have sent him away. I should have said this was wrong, but I invited him in instead. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals for my family, and he said, I'm not here to push you, Eleanor. I'm here because I'm falling in love with you, and I needed you to know. I know you're married. I know you have a whole life, but I also know you felt what I felt that day, and I can't pretend it didn't happen. I won't follow you if you tell me to go, but I won't pretend I don't see you, all of you, in a way I don't think anyone has in a very long time. He was right. God help me.